Welcome to the Lathisms podcast. I'm Evelyn Lamb. In each episode, we ask a Hispanic or Latinx mathematician to talk about their journey in mathematics. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Santiago Schnell. Hi, how are you?
Doing fine. Thank you for the invitation.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela, from two foreign parents. So a German-Swiss dad who grew up literally in Venezuela, and then a Spaniard immigrant mother. And I did my undergraduate degree in Venezuela, so high school, primary school, elementary school, so all the basics there. I went to an experimental university. It's called Simón Bolívar University, which is very special because regardless of the degree you take, you end up studying advanced engineering mathematics as a minor. And I ended up studying biology because I thought I wanted to go into medical school. But I discovered in the process that I was very good in mathematics, and I knew that beforehand, but I was better than I thought I was.
So this school, you said that you had interest in science already before you went there. So as a child, were you interested in math and science?
I was. My dad, so he was the sort of person who wanted to educate Renaissance children. So he got exposed his children to absolutely everything. But there was something that he was absolutely certain with all of us, and I was probably the only child who picked it up. He thought that the future belonged to computers and mathematics. And even though he was a professional philosopher and lawyer, he pushed very hard for us to learn how to do computer programming in the 70s. So when computers were incredibly rare. And I ended up taking classes while I was doing my elementary and middle school, very basic classes on computer programming, because he foresaw that somehow computers and mathematics was going to be the future. And he came with very useful tricks. So for example, every time I was taught something at school that was very basic arithmetic, he would come with a different algorithm on how to resolve the arithmetic problem. So to some degree, I had a philosopher and a lawyer teaching me the future of mathematics by inspiring me and introducing me to things that I think at the time very few people could actually foresee. So, after that, so there was somebody else as well who played a critical role. I have an uncle who got trained as a physicist, and he was a computer scientist. At the same time, he played a fundamental role on bringing me new mathematical problems. And even though it was more a hobby rather than something that I was very passionate about, it got instilled. And in the moment I went into university, of course, it became very natural that I wanted to combine all the biomedical training I was receiving with mathematics.
Yes, and that's what you ended up doing, right? You entered college thinking you would go into biology, then found mathematics, but you've managed to combine both of those in your career.
Yes, I did. So the way at least Venezuela works is that we have long-term undergraduate degrees, which are more equivalent to advanced master degrees. So I end up pursuing the degree for 5 years. So the last year is a full-time research internship that needs to end up with a research thesis. And because I already had experience in the laboratory, and I felt that the experience in the laboratory was incredibly frustrating, I decided to make a shift into theoretical biology. And the only way I could make that at the time in Venezuela was moving to a lab of a theoretical and computational physicist. So I ended up going to work with Claudio Mendoza, who in fact played a critical role on the transition because he taught me how to be a theoretical and a computational scientist.
And can you tell us about some of the work you did either as a student or now in your career?
Surprisingly, so, and this is something that is very exciting. So very few people have had the opportunity of doing what I have done so far. So what I started to do as an undergraduate student is what I continue to be doing as an established scientist. I initiated my research studying enzymecatalyzed reactions. I model the rates of how biochemical reactions occur, enzymecatalyzed reactions, and I have been doing that since I was an undergraduate. I have worked on other topics, but the primary subject of my research and the interest and the things that I dream when I'm on bed, the enzyme catalyzed reactions and how to describe them mathematically. And we're interested in two fundamental problems. So one is how you take the biochemical reaction as is understood in the laboratory and describe that reaction into mathematical terms so that we can follow the dynamics. But the second topic that we're interested is on the inverse problem. So if I have the dynamics of a biochemical reaction, can I determine the kinetic parameters of the reaction using a mathematical expression that allows me to determine the kinetic parameters? And I have been dedicating my academic career understanding how we can accomplish the convergence between the forward problem and inverse problem in enzyme kinetics.
I imagine enzyme-catalyzed reactions must take place in all sorts of biological systems, right?
Oh, they do. So, in life, everything boils down to enzyme kinetics because enzymes, what they do is that they accelerate the rates of the reactions. The reactions would occur in the absence of the enzymes, but it would take such a long time that life wouldn't be able to exist without them. So what life has exploited is the enzyme catalyzed reactions that actually accelerate normal reactions that would occur in 20 years. They would make them in a matter of seconds or nanoseconds. And industry has exploited as well enzyme kinetics. So, for example, the way cars operate is that they have as well enzyme catalyzed reactions or surface that operate as and accelerate processes. Industry, so the list is extensive.
So backing up in your career a little bit, did you have role models and mentors that helped you find this career path?
Well, I would say that early on in Venezuela, so I have my experimental mentor who was Raimundo Villegas. So he used to be the Minister of Science in Venezuela. So I was mentored by somebody who was a scientist, but at the same time a politician. And he even though he thought that I was a very fine experimental scientist, when he immediately realized that my passion wasn't on the laboratory, but more on the thinking process, on the modeling, he actually helped me to find my way. And he was the person who actually put me in contact with Claudio Mendoza. And Claudio Mendoza, who was, he's a well-known physicist in Latin America. So he actually guided me as well through the process. And surprisingly, the other person that I have is I did my minor on philosophy in this Simón Bolívar University, and I have a philosopher professor, Rafael Caldera, who actually taught me how to be a good scholar, and a good scholar in the sense of that you need to read and you need to comprehend the literature better in order to come with original ideas. And he trained me as a young philosopher on the side, but that training that he provided was absolutely critical. And once I left Venezuela and I went to Oxford, where I pursued my PhD under the supervision of Philip Bainey. So since then, Philip has been, the person that I consult on absolutely everything. So he still nowadays plays a critical role in my career. So if I have a doubt about a challenge that I'm facing academically, scientifically, or even politically within the academic system, I go and talk to him. And he's a genuinely nice person despite of being an incredibly famous mathematician.
Well, and something several people on the podcast have mentioned is finding mentors and people who can help you in your career who might not come from exactly the same work that you're doing, might be in a different area or even in a different field completely. It sounds like that happened with you.
Yes, it happened with me. And the only person who actually has a similar career, so within my mentors, I would say that is Philip Bainey. Even though he got trained as a mathematician, he did his PhD in mathematics. So everyone else that early on in my career helped me to become myself a mathematical scientist were not mathematicians. So you have my dad, who is a philosopher, a lawyer. You have Raimundo Villegas, who is a biophysicist, physiologist. So Claudio Mendoza, who is a theoretical physicist. Rafael Caldera, who is a philosopher. So all these people play fundamental roles.
So now you work in a lab at the University of Michigan Medical School. So you must also work with people coming from different backgrounds. So probably not everybody comes from the math side.
I think very few of them work on the math side. So currently I have 5 people in my research group, and only one of them has mathematical training. The other and he's a postdoctoral fellow in the group. The other postdoctoral fellow is a mechanical engineer, and then the rest are students, and all of them they have biomedical backgrounds, which are very similar to the background I have. In terms of collaborators, it goes all across the board. So I have multiple collaborative projects. Most of them are with people who are either medical doctors or basic scientists in physiology, biochemistry, microbiology. And the way we operate is that we try to find a problem where the hypothesis that they are testing experimentally is incredibly difficult to validate solely with experiments, and the mathematical model serves like another experimental tool that actually helps you to interrogate the hypothesis and the mechanism that you're exploring. And it's very fun because we take the most joy when the mathematical model fails to predict something. And the failure is important in the process because it allows us to understand that the assumptions that the biologists and we have made with the mathematical model are incorrect. And those are the assumptions that serve as the foundation of the mechanism that they are trying to explore in the laboratory. So I make my living as a mathematical biologist by exploring failure. And the more failures I have, the better our models become in the long term. Because of course, once we have a failure, we recognize where the model needs to be modified and the mechanisms need to be improved to continue exploring how the biological or the biomedical process works.
And that seems like it transitions well into my next question, saying like failure is where you really get the new science. So I'd imagine in any career, you do have ups and downs, you have challenges that you face. And how have you overcome some of those challenges?
There is a point where when the experiment fails, when the mathematical model fails, when you believe that you have a fantastic research problem that you have solved and you write a scientific paper and it gets rejected. So early on it's very helpful, but then you start to realize that the rejection is a very constructed part of the process. Sometimes the rejections that you have to admit, there is a failure in the process. Maybe I didn't communicate well what I wanted to say, and the failure was more in my part that I didn't do the communication correctly. But most of the failure that we receive in academia, it comes with a positive feedback. It comes with recommendations where we realize where things were not done correctly. And then you have the opportunity to do corrections and then rebuild yourself. And that's something that I like from the failure in the academic system. So regardless if it's a failure in the science or it's a failure in the promotion you were seeking or in the prize you wanted to win, there is always something that you receive back on the feedback that allows you to become a better person. And I think the younger people early on, they get very frustrated and even sad that failure is part of the process. But what I don't realize that failure is part of the process, because with failure you become a better scientist. And it takes time, so I don't think there is a secret on understanding how you can overcome failure, other than taking on and counting with the network of mentors who actually help you to understand how you can overcome failure. And that's where when I have my first rejections, I would talk to my mentor, I would go there, heartbroken, and then we will recognize where the opportunities for improvement could be made.
So that community is really important.
Community is important. You have the community of people that. So I always say that I have all these friendly competitors that are people that I want them to review my work, or they're working on the field, and we have a very friendly relationship when we go to conferences. We probably don't have a very friendly relationship when it comes into reviewing our own papers, but I consider them great friends because I want to make sure that my work is evaluated with the highest standards before it gets published. And if somebody lets me publish something that is not of good quality, I don't consider it a good friend. And there are two kinds of friendships. You have the friendship behind the anonymous reviewer that you expect they're doing a fine job. And then when you receive the feedback, that sometimes it can be very devastating, then you have the internal network, which they could be previous mentors, current mentors, or even colleagues that you have in the university who actually help you to understand and overcome some of the frustration that come as a result of this. And having the two networks of the people that you know who are the potential competitors, people who are working in the field who can provide good feedback, and making sure that they make you the favor of evaluating your work in the best way so that we improve science together. And then having this internal network of people that they're not anonymous, but they're part of your mentorship community and your colleagues is incredibly important. So it's a big family, and I like that. So I love that from academia.
And finally, do you have any advice for people who are interested in both math and other sciences about how to combine those and build a successful career combining math with other sciences?
I don't think there is a unique pathway. I think that's the first advice that I would say. So people have this tendency of believing that there is only one way of doing it. For example, most of the people believe that you should pursue first mathematics and then move into the field. I'm a successful example of somebody who didn't got originally trained as a mathematician, but somehow managed to do the transition, and I can live in the two worlds. I think what is important is understanding the two fields relatively well. So you need to have an intuition of what are the mathematical and computational tools that are required to solve a problem. But at the same time, you need to get enough understanding from the field you want to work on, which could be economics, it could be business, it could be physics, it could be engineering, it could be biology, to gain a basic understanding of the critical questions that can be solved with mathematical and computational models. There are many things that in economy, politics, sociology could be answered with our mathematical models, and it would be a mistake to actually try to do mathematics within those questions. So what you need to do is identify the right set of questions. And one way of doing that is that, and it's the way I have done it so far. If I don't know very much about the topic, I make sure to find a collaborator who works on that topic, and I get taught by the person, by the one-on-one interaction. And academia is very much like that. So even the PhD degree, so people have this misconception that when you go to the PhD, you do the coursework and you obtain the PhD. The coursework part of the PhD is primarily informative. So the critical part of the PhD and the critical part of any research enterprise is a one-to-one relationship with the mentor. And the mentor generally is a master on something. It's somebody who knows much more than you on one specific aspect that is going to make a fundamental difference in your research enterprise. And when it comes into the application field, you need to find that master. You need to identify who is the person that is going to teach you the art of the critical question that you want to answer in that specific topic. And then you bring the mathematics on board and resolve the problem.
Thanks a lot for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Lathisms podcast. It's produced by me, Evelyn Lamb, and made possible by a Tensor Summa grant from the Mathematical Association of America. Our music is Volvere by La Floresta. Lathisms is an initiative to celebrate the accomplishments of Hispanic and Latinx mathematicians. It was founded in 2016 by Alexander Diaz-Lopez, Pamela Harris, Alicia Prieto Langarica, and Gabriel Sosa. You can find more information about the project at lathisms.org. That's LATHISMS.org. Join us next time to hear from another inspiring mathematician.